1:43. Welcome back to our final segment at First Up. In this segment, we're focusing on our friends in the Unit Trust Corporation. And today, why do I need to save? I said invest earlier on. Why do I need to save? Our guests are Rodriguez-Greaves and also Kerron Blandin. Good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Now, the first thing people are going to say is that we know we're supposed to be saving because it's prudent financial habits and stuff, but why do I need to save? When people are thinking of, I'm barely making ends meet, I can hardly feed my kids. How do you get yourself in a mindset that no matter how much you make, no matter how much the struggle is, you need to put aside something? How do you get that across?
Okay, well, it's important to understand that we can't predict the future, but we could actually make it more manageable if we set aside funds that would allow us to have an emergency fund in the case that there's some unforeseen circumstances. So, for instance, we may come across an event where we unexpectedly lose our job, or we come across medical expenses. If we actually have savings, then we won't need to take on unnecessary loans and increase our debts. We could actually use those funds to actually continue living the way that we do, because we will continue to earn our salary that we could use to meet our monthly expenses, but at the same time still have these savings that we could use to meet the unforeseen expenses. It's important to have at least 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses in an emergency fund. So in that way, if there's any event that arises, you could actually meet that event without having to take on unnecessary debts.
So, Kerron, how do you respond to people say, well, that's great for you all to say you all have great jobs in the Unit Trust Corporation. My salary is $2,500 a month. My rent is $800. My electricity bill is $300. My cell phone is barely $40 a month. Where is it going to come from? How do you reconstruct your life to add savings to that equation?
Well, we acknowledge that it's a little difficult for some people, a little more difficult for some people than for others to save, but it's absolutely essential, so we must do it anyway. The reality is that we all have to learn to spend less than we earn, because if you don't, more than likely you're living on credit, and that's not sustainable. So at the end of the day, it's important that you spend less than you earn, and you can go about doing that in a couple of ways. You can go about trying to increase your income. So for example, you can develop yourself, get some training, that sort of thing, to move towards, say, getting a promotion or perhaps getting a better job. You could do things on the side. You can start your own business, perhaps work overtime if you have that option, and do things to increase your income. But of course, the income is only a part of the equation. If you have increased your income and then you increase your spending as well, you're still back to square one. You're in the same position.
Extra, I'm going to spend $30.
Yes. So it's not really about how much you about how much you earn, but how much you keep at the end of the day. So it's also important that you manage your expenses, you keep them under control. We advise to keep under control your non-essential spending, so that, for example, you don't have to have the latest gadget that is out every time. You don't have to go to every party there is. You can use moderation and manage your expenses so that you can have more to put aside for the future. And we also suggest one strategy is paying yourself first, so that you put aside a little bit every month. Say you set up a standing order, salary deduction, so that it goes to your account at the Unit Trust, for example, and it goes there before you get a chance to touch it. And that helps in keeping the discipline of saving.
Don't forget that basically saving is, or / investing in other conversations, is actually treating yourself best, paying yourself first. If you're paying everybody else, you're paying the taxman, you're paying the landlord, you should actually be putting aside some money and paying yourself. That's what you're investing in yourself.
Yeah, so it's important, as Kerron said, when you get your salary at the end of the month, you want to make sure that it actually comes out of your salary one time, or you set up a standing order with the bank. In that way, you're not tempted to use the money for some other activity. You may have the money there and you say, okay, maybe this month I won't put it in Unit Trust. Maybe I'll spend it on something that I need, for instance, this new shoe or this new gadget that I wanted. But if it actually comes straight out of your salary, you're less tempted to actually use it for non-essential purposes.
How important is dealing with the issues of really identifying wants versus needs? And when you're setting up your budget and budgeting where that is concerned, very often people, I need cable, but I really don't need cable. I want cable. I want X, and that sometimes is a very difficult process for people to go through, given the lifestyle and the habits they've developed.
Yes, it's extremely important. I mean, developing a budget, as you mentioned, is really very important, and sticking to it monthly. So it's important that from the very outset you decide on what are those things that you need, as you said, as opposed to those things that you want, and set aside money for it. And you can also set aside a certain amount of money for things that you want, but it has to be in the context of how much you earn and how much you're able to save on any given month.
Is there a particular formula in terms of percentages that people should be looking at regarding saving? Is it 10%, 20%? How do you work that out based on what you make, based on your income, and I guess by extension your age?
Right. Normally people should put aside at least 10% of their salary. Of course, based on your budget, if you have excess income, you could save or invest more than the 10%. But generally, you want to reach to a point where you have at least 3 to 6 months of your salary in savings in the event that there's an emergency. After that, you could go about moving from saving to actually going into investing and looking at your long-term goals and actually putting aside money to meet those goals, whether it be for your children's education or for your retirement. But that 3 to 6 months is an emergency fund that you should have to actually keep yourself in a position where you don't go into unnecessary credit or debt.
Let's talk about sometimes the intangible, unspoken about advantage of savings in terms of building your credit rating and what that does for you moving forward. And sometimes it's not only about the money, but when bankers or investment institutes like the UTC see you have a pattern of saving, it puts you in a different position, bargaining or negotiating position moving forward, doesn't it?
That's correct, Paul. If you can take the example of buying a house. It's a requirement that generally in our banks here and financial institutions that to buy a house you put down 10% of the price of the house. And it's done that way for a reason. It's done that way so that the bank has you have demonstrated to the bank that you are interested, that you are invested in this property, and that you're not just going to walk away from it when if something were to go bad.
And you're showing some pattern of discipline and consistency.
So the banks look at that kind of thing when evaluating whether they're going to give you a loan and those things.
How important is where you save and what instrument you use to save? Some savings instruments can be short-term, medium-term or long-term, accruing different levels of interest rates alongside this. How important is deciding upon that, Crystal?
Okay, when you're saving, it's important to understand the difference between saving and investing. Saving is actually where you put aside funds and you want to make sure that you have access to those funds when you need it. So you should look for a product or a security that is actually very low risk and allows you access to your money at any point in time. So for instance, the $TT Income Fund at the Unit Trust Corporation, that is a very low risk investment, and whatever capital you put into that fund, when you come to redeem, you actually get back that capital. You also get the added benefit of income on that investment. In terms of investments, it's normally for more long-term goals, so you actually put your capital at risk. You actually take on the objective of not only having your money there when you need it, but actually growing your money. So you're looking for returns. It could be either through income on that capital or actually your capital growing. So those tend to be more long-term investments. So for instance, the Growth and Income Fund or the Universal Retirement Fund at the Unit Trust Corporation, those are products that you would use for more long-term investing.
How should one decide in terms of percentages? How much should be saved and how much should go into investment? Or is it a natural progression from saving to investment where when you start developing those types of habits?
I believe it's a natural progression, as you said. Saving, as Crystal mentioned, is just putting aside the money, whereas investing is having that money work for you. So you should have as much money working for you as possible, but you have to do it based on what your risk tolerance is, for example, and that sort of thing. So you're not going to put all of your money into an equity fund. You're going to manage exactly where you put it. You may put some of it in a income fund like our TT Income Fund or US Dollar Income Fund, and you put some of it towards equity fund like our balanced fund like the Growth and Income Fund, the Universal Retirement Fund or the North American Fund. So there has to be some kind of balance.
And we can't talk about saving without bringing children into it, and the age we should start inculcating those values about saving, because it's very difficult for people to change habits when they get into their 20s. If you don't start kids in the habit of saving and then moving into investment, how important is that, and how early is, should you start your child with saving as early as they can walk and talk?
Well, even before that, I guess as soon as your child is born, you should open an account for him or her and encourage them as they get older to actually use the money that they probably get from chores or as gifts to actually use that money as savings as opposed to using it on consumption. And in that way, they actually get the habits of knowing that this is something that I need to do, and as they get older, they would actually continue that habit as they go along. At the corporation, we have a product for saving for children. It's called the Kerron Investor Starter Plan. So you could use that as a vehicle to actually get them familiar with what saving is like and encourage them to do that going forward.
And they can, on a weekly or monthly basis, come in and see how the account is going and how their money is working for them or growing for them.
Yes.
Is it ever too late, Kerron, in terms of people's financial lives, for them to start getting their houses in order?
It's never too late. We always advocate at least starting. It's really important. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, as Crystal said. And the more money that you have set aside, the better, the more manageable and the less stressful it's going to be for you going forward.
What Crystal, is the first thing you should do when you plan on visiting the Unit Trust Corporation in terms of writing down what information may be useful, certainly date of birth, XYZ. But in terms of, I guess, your salary, your expenses, your monthly expenses, what is useful in preparing yourselves for a visit to an agent that would help in them advising you most effectively?
The important thing is when you come in, you need to know what are your goals. Do I have short-term goals? Do I have long-term goals? And in this way, when you bring us the other information, like for instance, your salary, your expenses, we could be able to sit down with you and actually come up with what are the best products for you to invest in to actually allow you to meet your goals. So always make sure that you know exactly what it is you want to save or invest towards.
Do you sometimes have to give people the harsh reality that, well, I'm sorry to tell you, you're living beyond your means? and how important is that, and understanding the words, I cannot afford? And that's not a bad phrase to say, but everybody has to say that. Oprah has to say, I cannot afford some things in the world, although it might seem impossible that she has to say that. But people need to get that into their vocabulary. Yes,
it happens sometimes. We have a UTC advisory services, which allows for even more personal touch than just coming into CSR. And at that point, you sit with someone and they actually develop a plan for you as to how much you should save and how much you can comfortably spend and those things, so that I'm sure it comes out sometimes that perhaps you need to cut back on this, that sort of thing. But they generally help the person in developing that plan.
And should you consider, even if you're a newcomer to it, starting saving and investing at the same time? Is that advisable in terms of allocating money that's easily accessible? Or are there instruments, investment schemes that sometimes act the dual role of savings that you have access to all the time?
Yes, we do have products that could serve both purposes, like for instance the TT Dollar Income Fund. It could be used as a savings vehicle because you get access to your money anytime you need it. But at the same time, it could also be used as an investment vehicle because you earn a return on your capital. So there are products that could be used for both, and we encourage people to actually set their goals and know exactly what you want to save towards. And in that way, we could recommend what are the best products for you to allow you to achieve those goals.
All right, so sounds of financial advice as usual. And you can get more information at ttutc.com. That's ttutc.com, or call 625-UNITS. That's 625-8648. Crystal Rodriguez-Greaves and Kerron Blandin, thank you as usual for your insightful information. And you can walk into any branch of Unit Trust or located all over Trinidad Tobago and get access to one of their agents or customer service representatives at any time. That's our show for today. Thank you so much for viewing. On behalf of the entire team, we invite you to stay tuned all day, and join us again, God willing, tomorrow morning at 5:30 for Wednesday's edition of First Up right here on CTV. Have a great day. Be safe.